A man is released from prison due to crowded population. This would allow him to murder two people. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Mark Bebout. Viewer discretion is advised. That was weird. Now, not much is really known about Mark Bebout's history. From what I understand, Mark Bebout was originally from California, and by the time this story takes place, he is a homeless man. While in California, shortly before most of the story takes place, Mark had sexually assaulted a 14-year-old girl. And at that point, he's like in his 30s, I believe. So he was convicted of this crime, and I guess he was only sentenced to a brief amount of time, but he was also required, as anyone who does this is, to register as a sex offender. But he doesn't do that. He actually ends up just skipping California altogether and does not register as a sex offender, and then he moves his way up to Astoria in Oregon. If he were to move, like he did, he was supposed to inform the courts in California of an address change. He didn't do that. He was also required to tell, the new state he's living in, he's required to register as a sex offender there. He doesn't. In November of 2010, he meets a woman named Amy Lewis, and the two of them become a couple. The relationship apparently started off okay, but then very, very quickly spiraled when Mark Bebout became sexually and physically abusive to Amy. And it was so bad and so consistent that Amy Lewis was finally able to break away from him, and then she went to the courts there in Oregon and filed a restraining order against him. Mark somehow manages to convince her to drop the restraining order, and so she goes to the courts to do so, but the courts are like, no. It was around that time now in 2012, very, very beginning of 2012, that he is in the Clatsop County area of Oregon. And through all of this, they find out that Mark had a history of sexual assault, and they found out that he failed to register literally anywhere as a sex offender, so he was arrested. But quickly after that, the courts just released him and gave him 2 years probation. And then he fled Astoria and he went to Portland. And then through some circumstance, the Portland police had arrested him for some reason. They discovered that he had skipped the Clatsop County area. He basically broke his probation. And so then he was brought back to Clatsop County. He was in a jail at the Clatsop County jail for approximately 2, maybe 3 days, when they basically began to have overcrowding. There was just too many prisoners there. So Mark Bebout was one of the people they chose to just let go and release. He was still facing charges, and he still had to go to court, and he was supposed to go to court on June 13th, 2012, but he was a no-show. Shocker. This is because he fled the Clatsop County area and he went back to Portland, Oregon. Mark had, found his way into a homeless facility there in Portland, and that's where he ran into a 32-year-old woman named Michaela Powell. Unfortunately, I don't really know much about her past, but at the time of this story, she was working at that homeless shelter as a volunteer. And this was at a facility, I guess, called Portland's Operation Night Watch. She volunteered there 3 nights a week. She would help serve the homeless community coffee. They would feed them. They would let them sit down and, cool off, watch some movies, play games. And she took time out of her life to help those in need. And then that's kind of how she met then 39-year-old Mark Bebout. And then Michaela Powell went missing. When police were looking into Michaela and her disappearance, they found out that Michaela actually let one of the homeless individuals from the shelter stay at her apartment. They found out that particular person's name was Mark Bebout. Police were able to track Mark down, and on his person, they found Michaela's like credit cards. They also found, I guess, food stamps in her name. And by the way, they found him in Seattle, and this wouldn't be until July 19th, 2012. So about 8 or 9 days before they found Mark Bebout, they were finally able to get access to Michaela Powell's apartment. When they did, they found her body. She was partially decomposed. She had been dead for at least a few days. They were able to determine that Michaela had been sexually assaulted at least once, and her cause of death was she was strangled because they found a shoelace around her throat. Police had wondered something about another murder that had been unsolved, and back on June 26, 2012, they found the body of a young woman. So when they found her, there was no identification on her, and they determined she was likely a teenager, maybe possibly early 20s. Basically, they were finally able to identify her as a 15-year-old girl who had run away from Vancouver, Washington, while her and her family were visiting that area, and she ran away from them. Her name was Mayra Sofia Cruz Rodriguez. She was born on April 23rd, 1997, and sadly, I don't really know much about her history either. They determined that she was also sexually assaulted, and she was also strangled to death. So when they found Michaela, they basically put kind of the two cases together because they were both extremely similar. However, they found Mayra's body, I guess, at Washington Park, there in the Portland, Oregon area. So the circumstances of how each woman was approached was probably different, because Michaela had basically invited Mark Bebout into her apartment. And so they're trying to figure out how Mark Bebout would have had any connection to Mayra. And they were kind of quickly able to determine how this came to be. They discovered that Mayra had gone to St. Vincent de Paul Parish. This is a parish that has a history and is known for assisting homeless people. When police questioned people at the parish, they basically gave a description of a man who was asked to help Mayra, another homeless man, and they determined that man was Mark Bebout. Now, of course, nobody knows that he's a sex offender because he didn't register anywhere and he didn't inform anyone. So they didn't really think anything of it. The church had asked him if he could assist Mayra in walking her to where she needed to go next. And that's when, I guess, near Washington Park, where he would sexually assault her and then strangled her to death and just left her body there. So now fast forward back to July 19th, 2012, they have arrested Mark Bebout, and through the investigation of both women's murders, they were able to link him to both. There was DNA with Mayra's body, male bodily fluid, and once they had him arrested, they were able to take his DNA, and it was a match. And they were now able to physically, with evidence, confirm that he was the one to sexually assault Mayra and kill her. He was charged with aggravated murder, first-degree sexual assault, first-degree sodomy, first-degree sex abuse, and I guess he had also stolen a vehicle, so he was charged for that as well. And then early on in 2013, he would go before a judge and in court, and he would just confess to both murders. And he was then convicted of all charges laid against him, and the judge gave him 2 life sentences, and he will never have the opportunity to be paroled. And these 2 women, one of them a teenage girl, they could have been saved had Mark not been released from an overcrowded prison. You know, they obviously knew he was a sex offender. They had his history. That's why he was put in jail in the first place. So why they would just let him go, someone like that, I'll never understand. I understand, though, that we do have an overcrowded, population issue with our prison systems and our jail systems, but there are certain people you shouldn't let go. Sex offenders, you shouldn't let them, those aren't the ones you release. But who am I to say how that goes? Michaela was trying to be a good person and help someone she thought was in need. And Mark took advantage of that. Myra was just a 15-year-old girl who was just going through a rough time in her life that she felt she needed to run away, and she was trying to find her way back to her home in California. She went to a place where she thought she could trust the people there, and she was put in the hands of a monster. And Mark once again took advantage of another young woman. Their murders never should have happened. Never. But hopefully they are now resting in peace. But that is it for this video, True Crime Aroonies. I hope you found it interesting. As usual, if you have just tripped, fallen, and stumbled your way into this video and seen me for the very first time, hello, I'm Mike. I tell true crime stories, obviously. So please subscribe to me here, give this video a like, and so it gets pushed out to the YouTube universe. And then follow me over on TikTok and my other socials as well. All of the links are below. I tell true crime stories on TikTok as well. I have about 3 million followers over there. And yeah. Next, if you have a case that you would like to see me cover, please email me. My email is listed below. And then all you have to do is email me the name of the person, where it happened, and when it happened, and I can add it to my list eventually, I promise. I do pick my cases at random when I cover them, so I will cover those eventually. I just couldn't tell you when because I do it randomly. Next, if you want to support me in any way, we do sell merch like t-shirts and hoodies and stuff, also in the link tree below. And we do ship all over the world. Yeah. And then lastly, if you have a Discord account and you want to join my Discord server, it's also in the link tree below. Broken record over here, Mike. Please be over the age of 18 or else you're going to be given the old boot to the booty and kicked out of that place. Thanks. All right, let's finish this video with a chuckle. Let's do a dad joke from Live, Laugh, Lose. And I have to do it. Oh, I dropped a bunch of cards. Read the joke like Mickey Mouse. Oh, boy. Okay, haha. Here we go. Here's a stupid dad joke for ya. Oh, what does a nosy pepper do? Ha-ha! You laughed too early, Mike. Well, what does a nosy pepper do? It gets jalapeno business. Ha-ha! Jalapeno business. Ha-ha! Yeah. That was a wahoo! Thanks, Goofy. Dick. Gorsh. Huh? Okay. I forgot how to wave. Bye. This is it, right? Yeah? Okay. Okay.